Welcome, everybody. I've got Scott Church with me, and we are here to talk about the rule of 20. What is the rule of 20? Scott, how would you describe the rule of 20 in relation to collecting and trends? How do you think about this?
All right. So the first time I ever really heard about this was from a guy named Chuck Rosansky, and he owns Mile High Comics in Colorado.
Okay.
And he brought this up because he said the people that were comics go in about a 20 to 30 year cycle, wherein you might collect a comic in your early teens. And by the time you hit your 30s, you have some expendable income. You've gone through college or you've become more experienced in your job, and you've got money to set aside to be able to purchase stuff that you enjoy, your hobbies again. And so you usually go back looking for the things you enjoyed. So whether that now we're seeing that with collectible card games, we see this big renaissance right now and games like Star Wars Unlimited, where Star Wars CCG fans, Star Wars trading card game fans are now picking up this game, and they're older in their life. They might be in their late 30s, early 40s, and they haven't touched a card game since the 90s, but they're now enjoying something again. They're going and taking their kids to play. They're going themselves to play. Maybe they're going with a family member, a sibling, a friend, whatever it may be. They're getting back into it. And it's this rule of 20 that basically things that were popular 20 years ago become popular again 20 years later.
This is a bit of a horrific example, but do you know what is popular right now again in fashion?
What's that?
Ugg boots. Ugg boots are making a comeback. And I think, for folks that lived through the early 2000s, they remember the Ugg boot plus vest combo was, at least where I was from the Midwest, it was everywhere.
and did you wear Crocs? I mean, Crocs were popular in the early 2000s, and Crocs are all the rage amongst kids these days.
Yeah.
I mean, my son wears them, and they get these little attachments you can connect to them to like have little things on them. Yeah, it's super popular. So it's things like that come around. I mean, you see that in music, where the This Is Young festivals going on in Vegas the past few years, where it's all these it's a big thing, like with all the scene kids with their hair combed one way, we're going back to see, My Chemical Romance play again. And so you see that in pop culture, fashion, music, all of that kind of has a renaissance about 20 years after it came out.
And absolutely. And I think this is something to think about, not just for collecting, but as you said, it's multifaceted. 2026, new Harry Potter show coming out. I think it's an HBO production.
Yeah.
How strange. Almost exactly 20 years before you had Deathly Hallows, right? Like the final movie. And you have this opportunity to revamp it because you have existing fans, and ultimately creating new IP is much, much harder than just revamping old IP that has a built-in fan base. So the Harry Potter show, who knows if it's going to be good or bad, but 20 years ago, the last movie came out, give or take 2 years. And so I think with collecting, it's really interesting is right now, I think we're entering into a new golden age with card games. You walk into a game store and it's like, wow, there's people playing Magic, there's people maybe playing Pokemon, I don't know. But there's also people playing Star Wars Unlimited, people playing Lorcana. Like the health of the ecosystem feels really vibrant. And to me, it's because 20 years ago, we were exiting the golden age, right? You think the late 90s, early 2000s was really the golden age for a lot of these games. And while these IPs might not come back, the spirit of that is almost back, with a spirit of, playing these games. And there's like developers that were maybe also, I mean, this is just a hypothesis here, but you probably had a lot of people that grew up playing Magic, Star Wars, whatever in the 90s. And now they're mid-30s and they're like, hey, I've always wanted to do a card game. Let's do a Kickstarter. I mean, I'm not going to get any Kickstarterification. The number of games on Kickstarter is phenomenal, because you have people that maybe now are in their 30s that have a little bit of disposable income and want to pursue their passion project. And maybe that was launching MetaZoo. But
yeah.
Well, I think that's what
I just watched a video on the guys that are bringing back the Warlord game, and they were just fans. I mean, they were like teenagers when the game was coming out. They were big fans of it. They stayed on with kind of the players committee version of it and continue to be part of it. And now they're adults and they're creating this Kickstarter, or have created this Kickstarter. And that's basically what you're talking about, is it comes back around. The game store I went to as a kid, growing up as a teenager, it's now owned by two of my friends, that were players at that store, and they didn't move away from Franklin, Tennessee. They own Outer Limits. If you ever go there, if you're around the Nashville area, it's a great place to visit. And they own that store now. I think a lot of the game stores are owned by kids growing up playing at it. It's generally not the crotchety old guy that put his collection in the back and it's just his own stuff. And if he doesn't sell it, that's fine because he's happy to have it. It's generally the people that enjoyed playing these games now running these stores, and they have a better sense of how game stores should be. And so it's all around, from the ecosystem of playing at places to the games themselves, are seeing this cycle coming around.
Yeah, it just reminds me, now that you're an adult, you can be whatever you want to be, and you can do. And I think it takes some people into their 30s to actualize and to realize that notion that, hey, I don't have to do. If I'm just into collecting dorky card games, I don't have to go to the bar on the weekend. Maybe I get more joy out of sorting a box of cards and making decks, and I don't necessarily have to feel like the pressures and social necessities of doing stuff I don't want to do anymore. I mean, I feel like a textbook example of the rule of 20. I was like, almost 20 years, I found my collection again. I was like, all right, this stuff gave me a lot of joy. What if I finish these sets? And I see this playing out. So this leads into a topic of a concept I've been playing with, which is the rule of 40, right? So I don't think that you're going to find a Wikipedia page on this one, but this idea that, all right, I mid 30s, late 30s right now. 20 years from now, what am I probably going to be doing? Maybe downsizing, maybe thinking about smaller space, kids are out of the house, those collectible cards or whatever collectibles I don't have the space for in my smaller space. And so I think you see this happening with a lot of things after 40 years. I think the biggest example here is Elvis memorabilia. Elvis memorabilia had a huge renaissance in the 90s, right? 20 years after Elvis dies, everyone wants records are its own deal right now. I think they're also having a moment. Actually, I read recently that records outsold CDs this year. And, that's probably a whole nother special case bucket. But Elvis memorabilia, you just don't have people like, I don't ever want to own an Elvis bust that's a clock or something, right? But I think in the mid 90s, these were really hot commodities. And I mean, there's also something to be said with all these rules and the utility of it, right? If it's just Beanie Babies are going to be junk forever. And there is.
Did you say Pops or Beanie Babies? I couldn't tell.
Beanie Babies.
Oh, Pops is okay.
Pops is are those little Fez things? No, Pez.
It's the little figures that have the big heads on them, and it's for the Pop figures.
Oh, Funko Pop, man. Honestly, I'm not too bullish on. I'm not a Funko guy at all, but that's one place where I'm like, these feel like a collectible that takes up a ton of space, may not hold value. People think they're weird when you go into their room and it's just like Funkos. Have you ever been to someone's house and it's like a Funko shrine?
It's a little odd.
Yeah. If you're a Funko collector, please keep watching. We love you. But so I think as folks listening, you're thinking about not just collecting, but pop culture. Why are things kind of happening the way they are in the world, and why are Ugg boots popular again? Think back to what makes you feel good. Nostalgia is such a powerful drug, and everybody knows that, including Hollywood producers. And it's everybody knows that nostalgia is super powerful, and that 20 years after, if there's some utility or the product looked good, that's probably another good thing to add in. Did it visually look good? I don't know about Ugg boots looking good, but whatever. There's people that thought they had to collect every color of them. You might see a renaissance with this stuff. So I'm kind of like thinking back of like, what happened 20 years ago? Is WoW, World of Warcraft about to make a comeback? Which I actually think they launched WoW Classic a while back.
Right. Well, I mean, it's interesting. Like the video game world, PlayStation 1 has been on fire for the last little while. PlayStation 2 has been just burning it up as well recently. And I know a few video game store owners where PlayStation 3, they've been buying a ton of that. And Wii U, they're buying a ton of that, knowing that they're about to hit 20 years. In fact, I was looking it up while we were talking. PlayStation 3 came out in 2006. So we're 2 years away from 20 years for PlayStation 3. So it'll be really interesting to see. Is you see this a lot more in video games. I was selling a lot in Nintendo at the time when it kind of hit its apex. And then we saw it move into Super Nintendo and then Nintendo 64. And it was like Nintendo's sales have really there's still games that sell, but for the most part, most people have really trailed off from that. It's the new, like I was saying, it's almost like the early disc-based generation, 3D generation is really where the money's at right now, because those kids are all, I say kids, but now they're adults, all entering that phase of, having expendable income, and they're hitting that 20-year point where they're coming back to it.
Well, there's a little bit of, to use a fancy word, like ennui that happens as you get into your mid to late 30s, where you're just like, what is this all about? I got through school or training. I've been in my job for a decade now, and I come home and I make money, and I'm not sure what I'm supposed to spend it on. And there's lots of hobbies you can take up, and other interest me. It's sort of like this intellectual boredom, and that's something I think that resonates with me a little bit. And that's why collecting for me, kind of was like, oh, I actually really enjoy this. I enjoy putting sleeves on a card to an extent. I like 30 minutes of it is enough for me, but it's something that preserving, there's just preservation element as well. That's interesting to me. But I do think things go through cycles, and it's not hard and fast 20 years. It could be plus or minus 5. But I do think, as you're talking about the regular Nintendo games, I think you're getting past 20 years, you're getting into 30 years, and there's still historical value, but I wonder what those games are going to be like in 10 years when the people that enjoyed them in the 80s are kind of like, hey, I don't actually have as many closets as I used to because I moved to a smaller space. And, so it's interesting to think about this. And I'm not interested in timing any markets. This is more so just a philosophical discussion and thinking about our own mortality as well.
Right. And, and also the digitalization of all of this, think of like, there's ROMs you can get. You can buy these little emulator machines, the Raspberry Pis on Amazon that has, 700 games on it, whatever it may be. And so you don't need to have all those Nintendo console and games to be able to play them now necessarily. And we're seeing that, with GEMP or GAMP. You see that with Middle Earth has their own game. There's Card Gnome, there's a lot of different of these card games that we've enjoyed from the 90s that people are now putting in digital ways of being able to play it. And I think that will grow in popularity. Like you see the Lord of the Rings trading card game. They don't even do worlds in person. They do it online. And so I think we see more digitalization of our hobbies as well. For comic book fans, there's Marvel Unlimited. So you don't even have to collect the comics anymore if you don't want to. Like, I think a lot of us still like having the physical media because that's where our feelings come from with it, is that physical part. But for the ease and access to it when we might not have that, the digital is a nice way of being able to still enjoy our hobby, even if it feels like we might be missing a part of it.
Yeah, it's a really interesting discussion because I still think digital collectibles are virtually garbage, right? If it can be deleted off my phone or my computer, then I think there's something tactile that I chase, and maybe I chase it too much because I don't know where half the crap is. But there's something that you can hold it and be like, hey, I have this binder with the cards I like in it versus this file on my computer, whether it's an NFT or some sort of virtual copy of something. I think inherently to me that has less value. I mean, you're making me kind of nostalgic. I'm like, should I download the 2003 version of LimeWire back onto my computer to get every virus I could possibly get? What software was popular 20 years ago?
Right.
Maybe LimeWire is coming back, or whatever it was, Kazaa, those like early torrent sites.
BearShare, Napster. Yeah.
That was a funny time. Well, I'd love to hear in the comments what people think about this, how their experience has been with it. And I'd love to find some common ground with people that have also gone through this wave of, hey, suddenly I just feel the need to hoard stuff. I don't know why. Inside me, there's a deep desire to gather things from my childhood, and it's unexplainable otherwise. So,
and then Matt, I don't know if you felt like this too. You almost bloat yourself on it, where you're excited. Like I know during the pandemic, my family bought a bunch of Lego sets, and we got to a point where we were like, we didn't even finish a bunch of them. We kept them just sealed, and I eventually sold them off because I'm like, we just don't have space. We ran out of interest. And so I think that's like a big part of it too, is like sometimes we go extreme with our hobbies and we almost overdo it, and then we're like full. Then it's just like, get it out. Like we just don't want it anymore.
Well, I think it's almost like goes through like a relationship phase. Well, it was the honeymoon phase. You're like, oh my God. And then this set came out after I stopped playing it. What's this set? I'm looking at the cards, like Theed Palace in Star Wars CCG was like that for me. I'm like, wow, what, they had battle droids? What do these battle droids do? And they all have goofy names and random ships. What is this set? This is so interesting to explore. And now I'm just like, oh yeah, it's a box of Theed over there, right? It's like you get a little more comfortable with it, and you're like, ah. And that's not to say I don't derive joy from it, but I think that with a lot of this stuff, the treasure hunt, the scavenger hunt of finding the pieces is the joy, and the ownership is nice, and the presentation is nice, but that's not what gives you the long-term good feels. I don't think it's finding stuff and finding community. And that's why I always recommend for folks looking to get into collecting, like find other people, because it can be kind of isolating inherently collecting things and putting them in a binder and only you know the order in there. That's cool information to have in your brain. But when you have people over at your house and they look like, what's this stuff on the wall? You're like, no, don't look at that. That's private. That's a private bookcase. But it's nice to have other people. You know, like I had Andy over to my house and I showed him my collection, and I don't know if he enjoyed it, but I enjoyed showing him it.
Yeah,
So,
yeah, isn't that funny? Oh man.
anyways, well, I think that's all we have. You have any kind of final thoughts on this, Scott?
No, I mean it always comes down to me. Enjoy, pick up the things you enjoy, and if you're not enjoying it, find it a new home. That's don't let it take up space or time from your life. So
yeah, that's one thing to say about all physical mediums. They do take up physical space, and sometimes things taking up physical space can also take up mental space. And you don't have unlimited of that, unfortunately. So I'm like thinking about this box of cards next to me, right? And I'm like, I gotta get, oh my God, I forgot about that. No, so anyways, I hope that everyone enjoyed our discussion about the rule of 20 and my hypothesized rule of 40 here. I'm enjoying the collecting journey. I'm nowhere near the rule of 40 for any of my hobbies, but it's going to be interesting what the next 20 years have to hold for all of this. So thanks for tuning in, everybody, and we'll catch you next time.